In this video, I will show you how to do the wiring for the HMC-4 in two different ways. First, I'm going to go through how you would wire it up if you have a different breaker for each of the different heat mats and for the control itself. And then I'm going to show what it would look like if you have a single breaker for everything. So let's open up the control here, and then I'm going to zoom in a bit here so you got a bit of a closer look. If we have a breaker for every unique one, just grab my wires here. So we'll go ahead and connect our hot into L1 and neutral into L2, and that's from our first breaker. That is going to power our control. What we're going to do is we're going to run our hot for our from the breaker, from the panel, into our variable, and then we are going to run our hot or our black from our heat mat here also into the variable stage, and then we would tie together the neutral from the heat mat and the neutral from the breaker. So those two we would tie together, otherwise just kind of off screen there. And it's going to be the same thing for all of them. So we have our hot from our panel, and it doesn't matter which of these two terminals things go into. So I can put, in this one, I can put the hot from my panel into the right hand side, and then from my heat mat I can put that hot into the left hand side here. And then again, we've got our two neutrals, and those we will tie together. Yeah, I'll just again tie those together off here. All right, then moving over, I'm just going to adjust the camera here a little bit so you can see better even. We've got our variable 3. So here again, we'll put in our power. Then we've got our hot from our mat, and then we're tying the neutrals from our from the panel, from the breaker, and the neutral from the heat mat here. Those two, we tie those together. So I'll bend those out of the frame here. Just had to grab one more set of wires here. We can put in our final breaker, put in the hot from the breaker again, and then we can put in our hot from the heat mat. This one I've got my actual heat mat wiring here. Then of course, obviously the ground we would tie in with the ground there onto our ground planes here, and for this one, let's see, that'd be this neutral from my panel we'd tie that neutral together with the neutral from the heat mat. And that is about it. That would be how you would wire them up. Of course, as well, I only have the one real heat mat. Let me just adjust here. So I put that one real heat mat into number 4. So what I would recommend, or variable 4, what I would recommend is with your temperature sensors, just set them up so that variable 4 uses temperature input number 4. That way it's just clean, simple, everything matches each other, and it just makes sense when you're going in and doing the programming later on. So for this one, I'd put my temperature sensors into number 4 here for my heat mat number 4, and then I didn't grab dummy wires for the other mats, but those would you know, for our mat going into variable number 1 for this mat here, for this guy that's going into variable number 1, the temperature probes that go along with that I would then put into terminal temp 1, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead and use some movie magic to undo all these wires really quickly, and then we'll transition into a quick showing of what the wiring looks like when you're using one breaker to wire up everything. All right, so I have everything cleared out, and now we can take a look at how we wire things up if we are running everything off of a single breaker. So right here I've got my L1, my hot power, and my L2, or my neutral power, wired in from the breaker to power the box. Then, if I take one of my heat mats, what I will need to do right now, we're just gonna ignore the neutral from the heat mat. We're just gonna connect all of the hot side. So we will put our heat mat into variable 3 here. And then what we're actually going to do is I'm just maybe going to do all of the jumpering right away. So what we need is our power. I'm going to use red wire here for the jumpers so you can see how we're jumpering the power more clearly. So we need power going into our variable 3 here. I'm going to loosen that up because I need more space for our jumper. That's going to hop right over. And again, you can use either terminal for your hot power or for your heat mat here. So I can do it just like this, where I'm using the right hand terminal for this hot power, and then here in this one I am using the left hand terminal. Doesn't really matter. So we'll jumper our power there. Then I've got this big huge long one, but basically that's just going to be another jumper. So we will put those together, and the other end of that jumper is going to come over here. So into our, doesn't really matter, we'll just do it all the way on the far side into variable 1. And then finally, we need to jump from variable 1, come on, to variable 2. So I'll just tighten these down. There we go. And there. Okay, so we now have our main line's power running into L1, and then that power is jumped over into variable 3, and then that power is jumped over to variable 4, and then that power is jumped over to variable 1, and then that power is jumped over to variable 2. And then we're just going to take all of our heat mat connections and we will just, oops, put those in to the remaining terminal. And of course we've got our one real heat mat wire that I've got here that goes in there. All right, so then what we are left with is a bunch of neutrals from our heat mats. So we've got our 4 white neutrals here. So what we need to do, obviously the ground, we would tie in with the ground there. So what we need to do is we're going to tie all these neutrals together, and then we also need to tie them together with our original neutral from our panel L2 here. So I've got another jumper wire here. It's black, unfortunately not white, but I think you'll guys get the picture. So you could throw it in a wire nut. These aren't wires made to do such, but for a video, I wonder if I can get them to stay together enough. Maybe I just wrap this around enough. Either way, we're wrapping all of these neutrals together, and then we can run another jumper wire from those neutrals, because we're not going to fit all of these in under the one terminal, but we can then just run that jumper wire in there. And so essentially now we have shorted together all of the neutrals. If these would be capped off together, then we have now shorted together all those neutrals in the same way like we jumpered together or shorted together all of the hots. All of the neutrals are together now as well. So that would be how you would put it together if you're running everything off of a single breaker. If you're wanting to do some sort of combination, say you want to combine two, like let's say variables 1 and 2 on the same breaker, and then variables 3 and 4 on the same breaker, and then have a third breaker solely running the panel, you can do that, right? You would just, if you wanted these two together, you would not have this jumper coming out here. You would grab a new line cord, or in my case it's a line cord, or in your case it'd be the wiring from the panel, and we just put in our hot. We jumper over the hot, so now we've got a shared hot. Put in the two hots from the mats, and then we're tying together the neutrals from all three. So our panel neutral and then the two neutrals from the mat. Those are all tied together. So that would be how you would do, see if I can get a bit of a picture there in case it wasn't clear, but that would be how you would do a kind of a hybrid system of only doing a couple of them on the same breaker, not all of them. So that is it for wiring for the HMC-4. Yeah, I guess with this one, same as with the other version, I didn't bother going through the temperature wiring, but that's going to be exactly the same if they are sharing a breaker or have their own individual breaker. Same thing, wired it up as it shows in the manual.